Good morning, everybody. It's Dave Neal here with your Wednesday morning edition of the Rush Hour podcast. This is January 29th, 2025, and here are all the stories we have for your drive to work. Rachael Kirkconnell was on Call Her Daddy last night. It was a cultural moment with 200,000 people watching live. I'll tell you everything they talked about, the massive breakup, and all the details about how Matt James sent her packing from across the world. And then we've also got more Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Justin Baldwin conversations. More people saying, hey, Ryan seems to be the problem here. And also, what the heck went down with Baldwin's podcast? So we'll get into all of that and other important conversations happening. Is Medicare frozen? What's going on with Head Start and other government-funded programs that all have a spending freeze happening right now? Also, The View comments on Selena Gomez after her emotional response to the deportations going on, and a jerk ban. That's right. The Mississippi lawmaker who issued the jerk ban is now receiving death threats. So again, he did it facetiously, but hey, he still pissed off some people out there. So a wild day of the news. I never think I'd have Justin Baldwin and jerk ban in the same sentence, but it's a wild time to be alive. I got all these stories and more coming up next on The Rush. Now, this Rachael Kirkconnell story was the biggest story of the year, but several days after this story broke out, the Blake Lively lawsuits they hit fever pitch, right? But now we actually have the first public comments from Rachael Kirkconnell after her breakup. It was a shocking announcement several weeks ago, as Matt James posted, "Dear Father God, I'm so sorry, it didn't work out," whatever, right? He posts on Instagram. Everyone's like, is this thing for real? And as it turns out, Rachael Kirkconnell's sister, going to bat for her, said, hey, we only broke up 3 hours ago, or they only had broken up 3 hours before he posted that. So people didn't know what the hell was going on. Well, rather than make some cheesy Instagram post about how she feels, Rachael Kirkconnell went to the biggest podcast out there for a female audience. And I watched this last night with my wife, and I think a lot of people did because it had 200,000 viewers live watching. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, that's more than multiple cable news stations all put together. Unbelievable. I mean, that's more than like a lot of news stations put together right there. So their ratings were probably bigger than the actual Bachelor episode this week, and all there just for a conversation that was, dare I say, not the most scandalous, but heartfelt. And by that, and trust me, I love Rachael Kirkconnell, and I know her family. They're all, I don't know them personally, but they seem to all be good people here. Now, Rachael Kirkconnell, her story is kind of very common. It's somebody who, Matt James decided not to put a ring on her finger. And so then they'd be fighting over random things. She would try to, please him, and maybe he just wasn't too happy with her. So they're in Tokyo, or somewhere in Japan, on a 3-week trip. It's at the end, they're annoyed with each other, and they can't seem to find happiness. Some random conversation about finding the right restaurant on Yelp to go eat at dinner because he's a big food blogger, turns into them fighting, and him saying, some real, I wrote it down, actually, some of the things she claims he said. At the end of the day, there are things we aren't compatible with. I should be wanting to propose to you. I should be ready, but I'm not. I can't see myself married to you. And then they break up. So she has to take an Uber to the airport and then head back from Japan to the United States. But the craziest part happened right as she was on her plane getting ready to take off, is when she finds out that Matt revealed the story to everybody. Here's what she said on the Call Her Daddy podcast.
So whenever I take these long flights, I'm off the grid. So we're literally getting ready to take off, and my phone blows up. It's one of my best friends, and it says Rach with a bunch of question marks. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, how does she know? And then she texted me again and said, I saw Matt's post. Is this real life?
Unbelievable. So she's literally getting this kind of the heartbreak's already setting in, but she was broken up with that day. Can you imagine? And again, you could argue that it's kind of, it would suck to get broken up with, but it's kind of nice to be on a flight. You're going to get served those international flights. They serve you great food. Although was she sitting economy? There's a lot of things I don't know. Probably they're very expensive flights, but either way, so she takes off, doesn't have any cell phone service. And then by the time she lands 12 hours later, all hell's broken loose.
And that's how I found out that he posted So then literally the plane is taking off and I see his post and that's it. I don't have any service or anything for like the next 12 hours.
And then she finds out, and again, this is, she never made a public statement. She kind of just waited and collected her thoughts. So it's really sad the relationship didn't work out. It obviously has triggered the fan base of Bachelor Nation because people want, it's like, you don't want to be dragged along. We've all been there. We've all had our time stolen from us, and it's the one thing we can't get back. So I think it's a blessing in disguise that they broke up, even under such crazy circumstances. And I don't know where she's going to go next, but this is a big deal. This is a big cultural moment. If you're any number of brands out there, if you're an airline, you should be offering her first class flights for the rest of the year. What a great brand deal that would be. Boyfriend dumped you before a long distance flight, come to Delta Airlines. I don't know, something like that. But either way, our heart goes out to her because it seems like such a bummer that just months ago they were talking about looking for rings, and then he kind of feels that it's just not going to happen. And there's a lot of theories as why he posted his breakup announcement so quickly. My general thought is he didn't want it to be something where they broke up, then got back together. So by posting it, it was finalized. I don't think that's the right move. I think what you do is you wait 3 to 7 days, then you come up with some sort of joint statement so you don't have to do this kind of speculation. But as far as it stands right now, for Rachael, I say take whatever positive windfall comes from this. Go out there and do the dirty, go meet some guys, have fun. What do they say? The best way to get over somebody is to get under someone else. I don't know how it works. I'm just saying, do you, Rachael, do you. And if you want to do Dancing with the Stars, I support that too. Or go on Bachelor in Paradise, although I doubt that would happen. So anyway, there is your Rachael Kirkconnell update. So we've got several Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni stories to get into. The first, just a fun one here, is somebody commenting on the 6.5 minute long Justin Baldoni voice note to Blake Lively saying, "Boy, that was so good. Can he teach my husband how to apologize like that?"
Everyone had a chance to listen to Justin Baldoni's voice memo because I've never received an apology like that, which is something I will need to take up with my husband at a later date. But I have to wonder if hypothetically, she's clearly a woman who has given the facts, info, whatever you want to call it, that we've been given thus far. Like, she's clearly someone who maybe has needed like encouragement and like, during other creative endeavors, right? And then she meets someone like Justin Baldoni, who seems to be from just, I don't know any of these people personally, obviously, but he seems to be someone who's pretty self-aware. And, he doesn't say, "I'm sorry if you felt that way." He said, "Oh, that must have felt terrible. I'm sorry," which wording definitely matters. Now, if you're a woman who's not used to probably working with a man like that, and this is a guy who looks the way he does too, like, I wholeheartedly believe, in my opinion, obviously, that Ryan Reynolds had to have heard these voice memos and may have potentially, hypothetically, completely flipped out, which makes the whole nice pool stuff make way more sense.
Yeah. I mean, look, the conversation about Ryan Reynolds right now has reached its fever pitch. Coming up next, I'm going to share what Heather McDonald had to say about why she thinks Ryan Reynolds might be the real problem. I'll have that after a quick word from our sponsor. Today's podcast is sponsored by Rula. Finding a therapist you trust shouldn't be so complicated or cost you a fortune. Rula connects you with high-quality, vetted, licensed mental health professionals that are suited for you. And here's the best part. They take most major insurance plans. That means instead of paying hundreds out of pocket, you could pay as little as $15 per session. Rula also supports you every step of the way, from finding a therapist to scheduling your sessions to tracking your progress and dealing with insurance. They make it happen. Thousands have already trusted Rula to support them on their journey towards improved mental health and overall well-being. Head on over to rula.com/rushhour to get started today. After you sign up, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show. Tell them we sent you. Go to rula.com/rushhour and take the first steps towards better mental health today. You deserve quality care from someone who cares. And I mean, speaking of needing quality mental health help, after covering this crazy story, I think we all could use a little extra help. So we're going to get into Heather McDonald and what she had to say regarding Ryan Reynolds being the problem. This story next. Now, what's actually a good point she's about to make is why did Justin Baldoni decide to save the voice note? I never thought about that. When you send a voice note, usually it disappears on your end, right?
The biggest question is what compelled him when he was leaving that voicemail to record it and save it. And I think he probably, and people know sometimes when they have like an employee that they're like, I feel like something's weird, but I'm not gonna fire them, I'm gonna keep them. So I think he realized, I better save this because I don't want it to be interpreted as something else it's not. And also, it sounds like she said in the past, male directors didn't want her input as much. So he was trying to, again, assure her, like, I'm giving you, I want your input. So I think it's still all favorable towards him. They were really getting along. I mean, they said they were laughing and writing till 2 a.m. I really do think Ryan either was reading this stuff on the kid's iPad or something. He was privy to the conversation, and I think he was starting to, I think he was on break from COVID, like his thing, and he started to really get involved. And at first she was like, sure. And I don't know that she was ever really, truly flirting with him. I think Ryan got jealous and inserted himself. And then when the movie came out and it wasn't going in their way as far as favorable press, then I think he was like, screw this guy and we're going for it. Or if anybody...
So by the way, that timeline doesn't work out because Ryan got involved way before the movie was produced. But either way, it's an interesting theory, and a lot of people are pushing back against that theory, saying, hey, Blake Lively, we can't make it all Ryan Reynolds. She was in cahoots with him. So I guess both can be true. Here's a Pop Apologist podcast there discussing Blake Lively and and this is a theory that I actually floated, one way she can try to get out of this. Have a listen.
I actually have a theory. Can I tell you?
Please.
My theory of one way Blake could get herself out of this hot water.
Okay.
Is if she basically just says, I was in a postpartum haze.
That's exactly what I said. Claim postpartum anxiety, you were acting kind of different and, whatever. And again, I'm not saying this as to make light of any of these situations. I just think it'd be a smart play to go through.
I was I had just given birth and I was just under a lot of pressure and stress.
All true.
I think that's the only way that she's going to garner any type of favor, with the public after this, because I just don't know how she comes back from this. I was just thinking.
And I said the same thing. You just, you had to do these sex scenes. You don't think your body's back in shape. You've had your 4th child. It's like, who wouldn't feel anxious? I'd feel anxious if I had to take my shirt off when I take a shower, let alone in front of people.
Thinking as, if I were in her PR camp, maybe that would be a strategy I would give her.
I think that people are not as forgiving as you're giving them credit for.
I know. I'm not saying they would be. I'm just saying, how do you excuse a personality disorder? I don't know. Maybe this is giving full-blown liar.
Giving full-blown liar, they say. So that's Pop Apologist podcast. Well, from the podcast covering the story to one of the podcasts that was a part of the story, that's Liz Plank. She was Justin Baldoni's podcast partner. She released a statement saying podcast is over after Blake Lively's lawsuit came out. Well, people are wondering, is she going to come back into the mix now that there's a little bit more positive, favorability towards Justin?
Hey, so I have a random question. Remember that girl, Liz Plank, that Justin Baldoni had a podcast with? What happened to her? She quit the podcast when Blake Lively came out with this sexual assault case in the very beginning. And then she wrote this whole thing on Instagram talking about injustices and having Blake's back pretty much. And then nothing. Clearly so much has transpired between Blake and Justin since then. But what happened to her? Has anybody heard from her? Because it definitely seemed like she was Team Blake when this whole thing started. But now that everything has come out and the narrative has shifted, does she have her own experiences to talk about? Or was she just trying to get her little 15 minutes? What happened to Liz Plank?
She doesn't need her 15 minutes. Liz Plank is very successful outside of that podcast. She's been on, cable news. She's a big advocate for. Look, I feel bad for her to be put in that position after Blake's lawsuit came out. It was pretty damning information against Justin Baldoni. It just didn't add up. So and again, I'm no PR person here, but if I'm advising Liz Plank, I might say something like, I fear I rushed to judgment and we shouldn't be doing that. It's a good reminder to let systems play themselves out. The problem is, I'm sure Liz Plank was receiving receiving a lot of hell from her allies and her friends online saying, what the hell are you doing being associated with this guy? Which is one of the problems with the internet, is we're so busy to crucify each other for being associated with other things. We need to have more grace and let it all play out, right? I think that would be a more productive thing to do. Well, have some grace for the Mississippi lawmaker who he proposed a law saying that it should be illegal to spill your seed, as it were, if you weren't procreating. The law itself was said in jest as a way to say, well, why are we so up in arms if, trying to ban men's, reproductive rights, but we did it to women, So kind of a good message there. And he says, men want me dead over proposed masturbation ban. Boy, this is how 2025 hit really hard, really fast. How did we get here, right? The Mississippi lawmaker proposed a bill that bans masturbating for men and says he's shocked about how upset the dudes are. He's getting death threats. Mississippi Senator Bradford Blackman told TMZ men from all over the globe are livid about his ban idea, and they're leaving him vile messages with some threatening his life, which again, that'll happen when you try to take away men's rights. And again, we should use this as kind of like proving his point. It kind of proves his point. What he was trying to say is, isn't it kind of ridiculous? Shouldn't we be able to have better conversations without banning people's, from, agency over their body? All right, well, an update from The View. Sarah Haynes says, calm down on the Selena hate. She was just showing empathy. This in response, we shared the video of Selena Gomez crying after some of the mass deportations. I've received several comments from you guys saying, well, she doesn't speak Spanish good, and she acted in the movie that was objectifying a lot of Mexican culture. Listen, in the end, we can do whataboutism all day long, but find me a person that's truly happy and excited to see people getting handcuffed and ripped away from their families and sent and deported out of our country. And I'll find somebody that's in a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, because I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it's good for the sort of culture and for the sort of emotion of our country right now, especially if they're nonviolent. That's the whole problem. We'll get to that in a second. Let's listen to what Sarah Haynes had to say.
Selena Gomez, what people don't understand is two things can be true at once. All of these conservative media pundits answered with, what about the violent criminals? Selena Gomez can feel compassion for people being deported. She has a very personal connection to that. Her grandmother came in the back of a truck across the border, and her father was then born in the country. She's born in the country. She belongs here. But that is natural to then say, God, it's heartbreaking to watch this. It can be heartbreaking, and she can still not be okay with violent criminals. And they keep saying in there, we're taking the violent criminals. Well, the point I made here at the table is they're not transparent about who they're bringing. They're knocking on doors, they're rounding up people, and they're not saying, if they broke down every person deported and said, we've got 16 murderers, 15 rapists, 13 repeat offenders, everyone in this country, including Selena Gomez, would say bravo. But that's not what's happening, and they're not being open about it. So never condemn someone for showing empathy for another person.
Wow. Never condemn someone for showing empathy for another person. It has been quite literally heartbreaking seeing friends and peers in some cases celebrate some of these deportations. And look, I know it's fear-based. I know it's people that just think, well, we need to clean up the streets. I think it's so misguided. So what we have here is a reporter that asks the new press secretary, hey, are these criminals violent criminals? Have a listen to this exchange. It's absolutely insane what's happening right now.
Start with the criminals. There are many, many criminals. NBC News has learned that ICE arrested 1,179 undocumented immigrants on Sunday, but nearly half of them, 566 of the migrants, appear to have no prior criminal record besides entering the country.
So no prior criminal record, half of those. It's like, look, they're violent, they got a criminal record, sure, have that conversation. But we were specifically told they were going to be going after violent criminals. That was the big thing people were afraid of, murderers and rapists and things like that, right? That's what people were afraid of. Watch and listen how what was said is being pulled away from us in the new reality.
Illegally. Is the president still focused exclusively, which is a civil crime, it's not criminal.
It's a federal crime.
So I'm asking though, he said he was going to focus on those violent offenders first. So is violent offenders no longer the predicate for these people to be deported.
The president has said countless times on the campaign trail, I've been with him at the rallies, I know you've been there covering them too, Peter, that he is focused on launching the largest mass deportation operation in American history of illegal criminals. And if you are an individual, a foreign national, who illegally enters the United States of America, you are, by definition, a criminal. And so therefore, you are subject to deportation.
I apologize for interrupting. So to be clear, it's not violent criminals do not receive precedence in terms of the deportations taking place.
The president has also said two things can be true at the same time. We want to deport illegal criminals, illegal immigrants from this country, but the president has said that, of course, the illegal criminal drug dealers, the rapists, the murderers, the individuals who have committed heinous acts on the interior of our country and who have terrorized law-abiding American citizens, absolutely, those should be the priority of ICE, but that doesn't mean that the other illegal criminals who entered our nation's borders are off the table.
See, here's what I think's going on. It's like when a cop has to get a certain amount of speeding tickets, they're going to find anybody they can to justify getting these numbers up because that's what they're looking to do, juice the numbers. That's not good for the country. Get out violence. In fact, try to clean the streets up too. Well, absolutely. But don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. We'll be back with more right after this. The other story I wanted to get to is this freezing of federal money that's happening right now. A lot of people that work in the federal government or take advantage of, federal aid or even pre-K, certain things. There are, school lunches for kids. They're wondering, does this apply to us? There isn't that transparency.
Telling ABC News President Trump is now expected to offer buyouts to nearly all federal workers, more than 2 million Americans. So how would this work and what's driving this? And it all comes as the White House aimed to put a freeze on billions of dollars in federal aid, effective at 5 o'clock today, but then with minutes to spare, a federal judge temporarily blocking the move. That freeze could impact millions of Americans, from seniors to school children. Questions whether this could affect Head Start, school lunches, Meals on Wheels for seniors. We have it all covered tonight, beginning with.
So I'm a big, Head Start. I went to Head Start, and these programs that are great for single moms. We're a big advocate here for single moms out there that could use some of these social programs. Some of these. So my mom was on welfare growing up, and then she was able to get on her 2 feet and be a part of a successful business several years later. So the fabric of our society is some of these social programs that raise the basement of how bad it can get. They help out. Some of these systems are for people who might have fallen behind on their heating bill in the winter, and it helps them pay their heating bill. I mean, these are the things we should not be worrying about cutting in our country. We could cut the billions spent on our military. We could cut so many different types of just crazy costs, but it feels like we're getting nickel and dimed where it matters, which is for like your everyday human. Here is somebody, this was reported by Courier Newsroom here, that was talking to an elected official, a GOP congressman, about free school lunches. And they tried to make the claim that kids should go get a job. What the fuck has happened to our country?
Now with this freeze, vulnerable populations could be directly impacted. And so my question to you, just to follow up with you, would you support getting rid of school lunch for vulnerable kids and breakfast and Head Start, for example, and getting rid of childhood cancer research? Do you support that? And what do you say to your constituents? I want to follow up on that question, too, because I didn't hear an answer from you.
When you talk about school lunches, hey, I worked my way through high school. I don't know about you, but I worked since I was, before I was even 13 years old. I was picking berries in the field before we had child labor laws that precluded that. I was a paper boy. And when I was in high school, I worked my entire way through. You're telling me that kids who stay at home, instead of going to work at Burger King, McDonald's during the summer, should stay at home and get their free lunch?
Look at the reporter. She's flabbergasted. All right, just go pick some strawberries out in the field. You'll be fine. What? What about the 9-year-olds? What about the 7-year-olds? What about the kids whose parents can't afford breakfast for them so they get to school a little bit early just to get a little yogurt in? Where has our humanity gone?
Instead of going to work, I think we need to have a top-down review.
I think you're painting a lot of these kids with a broad brush. I would say that's not necessarily a fair assessment of all of the kids.
Fuck
so you
this
would
guy.
say all the kids in your district who use the free lunch, for example, or breakfast, they're all just sitting at home and not working. Okay, I just want to clarify because that seems like what you were trying to insinuate.
This gives us a chance. No.
So he's not even listening to her. It's atrocious, folks. Listen, we'll be here to cover some of this. If it's too heavy for you, I understand. We leave it on the back end of the episode, but I'd be remiss in such a cultural moment of society to not be discussing these simple pieces of our society that we've grown to expect that we have, which is Medicare, taking care of the elderly, right? Having a decent age where you can retire, and in some cases having a Pop-Tart for a child before he goes to school, so maybe he can get his brain a little nourishment. Is this a real crime out there? I mean, I'd love to know where this guy was picking berries, but he looks like he comes from a well-off family. And even if he didn't, I'm sure he had plenty of great programs that helped him get to where he is today. How soon we forget that those programs were there for us when we've made it to the top, like this GOP congressman. I'm disgusted by that. And look, it's only January. There'll be a lot more to these stories that we'll have to share. All right, I got a lot coming up today. Stuff I didn't get to. I've got Nick Viall. That video is coming next, discussing how he's sort of backtracked away from his support of Blake Lively. Oh, he loves some hypocrisy. We'll have that and so much more. My name's Dave Neal. This is The Rush.